Hey, welcome back to Sports Hop. We appreciate the love. Thanks for tuning in. You already know what time it is, episode 41. I'm in the building. Solomon's in the building. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We appreciate all the love. We're going to jump right in. But before we do so, I just want to say, how you doing, man? What's going on with you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm blessed, man. Just out here grinding like a dentist drill, baby. On the move, as always.
I haven't heard that one before.
Nah, that's a new one. That's a new one. That's a Sports Hop exclusive right there. So we're going to head to Boulder, Colorado, home of Coach Prime, the Colorado Buffaloes. A lot of expectations on Colorado this year. They went 4-8 last year, finished in last place when they were in the Pac-12. They've made the move to the Big 12. I think they've got their hands full and they're over their head, quite frankly. I mean, Coach Prime is a great motivator. He can definitely utilize the transfer portal. I do like his motivating tactics and what he does to, rally up the troops, so to speak. But, at the end of the day, Colorado has some of the most pressure out of any team in the collegiate ranks, to not only perform, but Dion, to produce as a head coach at a high level. They have yet to prove that. I do believe that he can get them there, but it's going to take more than 1 to 2 years. I think this is a 5-year rebuild, to be honest with you. But I still think Colorado will win more games this year than they did last year. But they do have their hands full this week. They got Colorado State, an in-state rivalry game. That game is going to be played in Fort Collins. The betting line on that game is 7.5, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on the show. But nonetheless, Dion, Coach Prime all time, is only 5-9 as a head coach up in Boulder. And he inherited not the best rosters. He brought a lot of his own players in. There were some challenges early on, and he's still making some adjustments along the way. The biggest thing that I see with Colorado is offensively, when it comes to throwing the football with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and Joe Horn on the outside, they can stretch the field. They can put up some points now. The problem is they can't run the football. They're only averaging 26 yards rushing this season. I know it's early, but 26 yards rushing a game, that's kind of towards the bottom of the barrel in the NCAA. And nonetheless, Shedeur Sanders is always under duress. He doesn't have time to set his feet in the pocket. He's always on the run trying to make it happen. Thank goodness he's such a great athlete because he's already been sacked a bunch of times this year. Imagine if he couldn't run, how many more times he would have been hit and put on the turf. But I am concerned with the fact that Colorado's offensive line, they're lacking size. They can't run the football. Defensively, they give up a lot of yards on the ground. So I think the Buffaloes have their hands full. Particularly this weekend, going up to Fort Collins to play the Rams. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I think Colorado needs to win this game to turn the corner and at least gain some momentum because they've got a much tougher schedule coming up. The Big 12 Conference is no joke. You got Iowa State and you've got Kansas and you've got some powerhouse schools in that conference, and they've got some tough teams ahead. But I am concerned in Colorado that maybe they're kind of over-promising and under-delivering here. But the Buffaloes, I'm always rooting for Coach Prime. I've met him several times over the years. He's a great guy. I love what he's doing. He's a great father. He's a great leader. He just doesn't have a great football team. So the Buffaloes need to kind of make some adjustments. They do have Shermer as the offensive coordinator. Hopefully they can, put some points on the board this week. But what are your thoughts in terms of Colorado? Is it just strictly glitz and glamour up there in Boulder? What is the real story? Do they have an identity? Do you think they can provide a winning program, or is this just lights, camera, action with Coach Prime?
Well, I think initially it was, especially when he went to Jackson State. I mean, he sort of really put a spotlight on HBCU schools there.
Right.
Showed that, people would be willing to come there if they had the right motivation. And I feel like he delivered. The problem is when he left, that school went right back to where it was before. And so I don't feel like he made any lasting change. Now, going into Colorado is obviously a big step for him, bringing in his own players and all of that. There had to be some contention in that locker room You just imagine, right?
Yeah.
But this year, yeah, I think reality is starting to settle in. I think the honeymoon is over. He's seeing the realities of it's not just the Dion effect. I've got to bring in good coaches. I've got to focus on having players and making sure they're well trained. And I've got to up the game of the people that I brought in. And so now I feel like he still has the opportunity to be successful, but I also feel like this is the point in which he's saying, okay, I've got to really, really take this seriously.
Right. I agree. And Travis Hunter, who's a two-way player, he plays on both sides of the football. I mean, this kid is phenomenal. I see Hunter going top 5 in the first round. That's what everybody's projecting. But he's an amazing generational talent. I love Shedeur Sanders' game. I think he's going in the top 10 too, provided he can stay healthy and finish out the year. I do get concerned because that offensive line is not helping out his cause one bit. He's on his back a lot. He's hitting the turf. He's taking a lot of contact. But he's also a great quarterback with a really powerful arm. So I am impressed. Shiloh Sanders, who's probably their best player in the secondary, has a broken forearm, so he's going to be out for quite some time. I think that's going to hurt the Colorado defense because they've already been thin in that department anyway. So a lot of things to be concerned about up in Boulder. We're going to see how it plays out with Coach Prime and those boys. Coach Prime, nothing but love and respect. I still love your swag. I still love your motivational leadership. You're just a great man all around. Good luck to you the rest of the way, and I will be tuning in to see how it plays out up in Boulder. We are going to move on, and we are going to hop to Cincinnati, Ohio, and we're going to talk about Joe Burrow and the Bengals, who came out the gate 0-1. They took the L at home to New England. Shout out to Gerard Mayo, his first game as a coach for the Patriots, getting their first win. That was a major shocker for many people, including myself. Cincinnati really looked, lethargic on offense. They couldn't really score a lot of points. They were turning the ball over. That T. Higgins didn't play. He's still battling an injury. He's questionable to play on Sunday when they play the Chiefs in Kansas City. Jamar Chase still hasn't gotten the deal that he wanted to get with the Bengals. I think that's been a distraction. Things don't look too good in Cincinnati right now, especially with that wrist of Joe Burrow, because there was some video captured on the sidelines recently when he's kind of doing this and kind of, anytime you've got an injury and you're doing this, even though you had surgery or you think it may have healed, that tells me that that's a bad sign, that there's still some pain, there's still some discomfort. He downplayed it, of course, when he was asked about it, this week. He kind of just said it's not a big deal. People were looking at the way he picked up a water bottle on the sideline. I'm not taking it to that extreme. Okay, I got my water bottle right here, and I'm doing just fine. But at the end of the day, shout out to Joe Burrow. He's a great player. The biggest thing with him and the question marks that I've had with him since he got into the league is, can he stay healthy? Because he's been injury prone. And that's what's hurt Cincinnati in terms of them making a deep playoff run and a playoff push. But Joe Burrow, to me, when you have a wrist injury, particularly on your throwing hand, and you're doing this and you're still kind of trying to work out the kinks, that's a big deal to me. He kind of downplayed it. I really believe that Cincinnati, if they look to win that division and kind of get to the playoffs in the AFC, they're going to have to get it together. Not just on offense, they got to get that deal done with Jamar Chase, and hopefully they can come around. They've got a tough game this week, so I don't anticipate them winning that game. I would not be surprised if they go down 0-2 for the year. So we're going to see how it all plays out. My question to you is, big deal regarding Burrow's wrist and this and everything that he was doing on the sidelines during the course of the game? Or is it just a fluke? Is it not a big deal at all? Because I think it is something.
Well, I don't think it's a big deal in terms of the larger picture. I mean, look at who we're dealing with. We're dealing with a guy who, when healthy, will easily do 4,000 yards in a season plus. He's done that twice. Last year, he was on track to do it again. He ended up with like 2,300 yards, got hurt with that wrist injury. And it's the first game back. These guys, I don't know exactly how much he did during the preseason, but I imagine they're trying to keep that thing, as lubricated as they can so they can get him out there. And I think for him, he understands that his position is a little bit tenuous, because if you think about it, look at all the attention that's being paid on young quarterbacks this year. All the new guys coming in. He understands he's not the star of the ball he was 2 years ago when everybody was, likening him to Joe Namath, just with that style and that flash.
Right.
So he knows he's got to get that back, and he's got to do it relatively soon. I mean, they have a decent backup in Jake Browning. And I say decent because anytime you have a backup quarterback who's thrown more touchdowns than interceptions, you're doing okay. You know what I mean? But he understands this is his year, that he has to prove that he still is the guy that he started out to be.
Right. I concur. Good point. We're going to move on from Cincinnati and we're going to hop east. We're going to go to New York. The Giants, shout out to the New York Giants, who actually play in New Jersey. So kind of a head scratcher there. The Jets and the Giants both represent New York, but they play in a stadium in New Jersey. So anyway, that's another subject for another day. But the New York Giants are in a world of trouble. It's just a grease fire over there with the Giants because Brian Daboll, as great of a coach as he is, the Giants haven't been getting it done. I really feel bad for Brian Daboll because, quite frankly, they let, Saquon Barkley walk and go to a rival team in the division, which I still can't figure out what the hell you guys were thinking, right?
Yeah.
But I don't blame that on Brian Daboll. I look at ownership with the Mara family. I look at the GM of the Giants, and I just ask myself, Joe Schoen, what are you guys thinking here? You let Barkley walk. You signed Daniel Jones, who's been terrible at quarterback. You signed him to a 4-year deal, $160 million deal, not too long ago with $80 million guaranteed money, right? So in the last 2 years, he is 1-6 as a starter. He has 1 win. He has a whopping 2 touchdowns, and he has 3 pick sixes for interceptions and scores. So he's got more pick sixes than he has touchdowns in the last 2 seasons with the New York Giants. That is not a good sign at all. The roster is a mess. I think the organizational things need to be kind of restructured. I don't really like the direction that they're going. They got dominated at home against the Vikings on opening weekend. Fans were booing Daniel Jones. I can't blame him because he stunk up the joint. And I think the Giants really, really leaped ahead too fast, assuming he was the quarterback for the future when they, signed him to that big deal. It's kind of ironic where they offered the money to Daniel Jones, but they kind of neglected Saquon Barkley, who was their best player, and they basically just let him walk. I just don't understand it. So the Giants get what they deserve. It's a grease fire over there in New York. I honestly don't think they're going to win more than 4 games this year. They'll be lucky to see 4 wins. They may lose more than that. You know what I mean? So they are in big trouble. I think Brian Daboll is on the hot seat. Even though I think he's a good coach, they really haven't inherited the best roster, and they let some of their key players go. So they get what they deserve. The NFC East, I think the Eagles are going to dominate that division. I think Dallas also will be a factor, but what are your thoughts on the Giants and Daniel Jones and this whole situation in New York? Because I think everything is collapsing in front of them as we speak.
Well, I appreciate their desire to create some consistency in that organization. If you look to Pittsburgh, look at a team that just believes in staying with its players, staying with its coach. I think there are more teams that want to try to emulate that. Unfortunately, I think Daniel Jones is not the guy. I don't think he's proven that he has the ability to step above and go to that elite level. And so, by them offering him that money, you can only think that they felt like they couldn't do any better in the market. So that's the only way I look at it. I mean, if he had gone on the trading block, he probably could have gone someplace else and possibly started over some of these younger players, and maybe he would have performed better. Maybe, it's always good to have that fresh start. But, it's the only thing I can think is maybe they felt like they couldn't do any better and they felt like they had to hold on to him, and so I don't know that necessarily guarantees him anything in terms of, him being there, the starter going forward. I feel like they'd be willing to lose some money if they found the right guy, but it wasn't a huge draft class this year, so
yeah,
they gotta sort of wait and see what's coming. But yeah, I feel like they don't have great expectations this year either. So I'm sort of in agreement with you. I don't think they'll go above 500.
Right. Well, there's two teams that I've got my eyes on that I think are just an absolute grease fire. They're just a disaster. The Giants is one.
You better not say the Dolphins.
No.
Okay.
No. How dare you? Come on. We're going to go to Carolina, North Carolina, the home of the Panthers. Shout out to Bryce Young. High expectations coming out of Alabama. Undersized as a quarterback. He really hasn't, won anybody over in terms of what he's done on the field. But in defense of Bryce Young, this is only his second year in the league. He does have a lot of pressure on his shoulders, but he hasn't inherited the best roster either. The Panthers really don't have a lot of, high-level players on the outside to stretch the field and give him the ability to throw the football down the field. But this is the NFL. You can't make excuses. They only want to see results. I really feel bad for Bryce Young because maybe he can perform in a different system. Sometimes players do have the talent. They do have the ability to perform at a high level, but sometimes they're just with the wrong organization. So the question mark is, of course, that needs to be answered is he with the wrong organization, or is he just not capable enough of getting the job done? Because he is undersized. He has struggled. He only threw for 161 yards and 2 interceptions against the Saints. And the Saints destroyed the Panthers last week, 47-10. I mean, they just came out the gate and dominated. And I just saw the body language of the Panthers after the first half. They threw in the towel. I can just see by the body language and the energy, and they had their heads down. It's going to be a long, long season in Carolina and a long, long season in New York / New Jersey with the Giants. I think both of those franchises are headed in the wrong direction. They're going the wrong way on the freeway. They need to basically pull over, put some more fuel in the car, kind of fuel up, and get a fresh start. And it's going to be quite some time before they can turn things around. So I really feel bad for the Panthers. I feel bad for Bryce Young. I feel bad for the fan base. They got a rookie head coach, Dave Canales. Shout out to him, of Latino heritage. He is the only Hispanic head coach in the NFL as we speak. So much love for him, changing the narrative, and the Panthers organization for giving him a chance. But he's got his hands full. I don't know how much he can do this year to turn things around. I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains in Carolina. And I think they're going to basically duplicate what they did last year. They won 2 games. Last year, they went 2-15. That's kind of my forecast for the Panthers this year, is I don't see them winning more than 2 or 3 games. It's definitely a lot of hard times in New York and in Carolina. What are your thoughts on this situation, Solomon, with the Panthers ownership, rookie head coach? And is Bryce Young the guy, or is it too early to tell? I think he needs another year.
Yeah, well, first thing I want to say is look at this guy. I mean, if you told me he was a head coach, I would have thought he was a player from Manchester United. You know? I mean, he's just striking. He looks like Ronaldo more than a head coach.
And he's in good shape.
And interestingly enough, he's the second Hispanic head coach that Carolina has had.
Yeah.
And he's the 5th that they've had in the NFL, behind, of course, great names like Tom Flores.
Ron Rivera,
exactly. So you're right. He has his work cut out for him. I think Bryce Young, it's like we talked about before, this epidemic of these young quarterbacks coming into these bad programs where they don't have protection. They don't necessarily have the coaching. And it gets to the point where these guys have to stop saying, okay, I'm going to try to change this by myself, and I'm going to look out for my own career. I think it's the point where they have to start looking at that. And one of the players that I think that they should start modeling is Tom Brady. And he's a guy who's been able to make wide receivers out of dishwashers and, just car salesmen and anything else. And I think they have to see, granted, they don't have the offensive line protection he does, but his ability to get rid of the ball quickly, I think these guys have to really work on developing that, because at the end of the day, they have to protect themselves. The team isn't going to protect them necessarily, and they have to create the stats that's going to give them a longer career in the NFL. So I think they need to change the mindset. I hope Bryce Young is listening to this. Bryce, get in the film room, get with your wide receivers, make something of them so you can make something of your career.
Yeah, it's when times are just really critical and tough, and all the adversity, that shows your true character, your true strength, not only as an athlete, but just as a person. So shout out to both franchises, the Panthers and the Giants. I just think you're headed in the wrong direction. It's going to be a long, long season for Panther fans and Giant fans. So my condolences early on. I'm just letting you know. We're going to move on, and we're going to head to South Beach in Miami. Very interesting situation that transpired last week with the Miami police and Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill heading into the stadium to get ready to play a football game versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's been all over the news. Hill got pulled over allegedly for speeding. My biggest take on this situation is I see a lot of fault on both sides. I'm going to start with Tyreek Hill. When you get pulled over, anybody for that matter, when you get pulled over, the first thing you should do is drop the windows down. You never want to leave the windows up, especially if they're tinted. They can't see what the hell you're doing in the car. So when somebody asks you to roll them down, just roll them down. Doesn't matter how much money you got in your bank account or if you're famous, not famous, you need to comply. If you comply, sometimes these situations can be avoided. But in some cases, it doesn't matter what you do. They're still looking to stir up some trouble. But at the end of the day, he kind of was aggressive with these guys in terms of his tone, and he could have easily rolled the window down, handed the license, explained the situation, and maybe none of this would have happened. On the flip side of this, the Miami Police Department needs to be checked, and these officers need to be disciplined or either let go, because he was going to get out of the car. When you aggressively snatch somebody by the arm, drag them out of the car, you put him in cuffs, and then he indicated to the officers he had knee surgery. If you want to, ask the guy to go to the ground, let him go to the ground. You don't need to just force the guy down to the ground, put a knee in his back, have him stretched out on the street. Then you got Calais Campbell and other teammates coming over to intervene. They put him in handcuffs. I mean, it just escalated into a situation it didn't need to go. They took it way, way too far. So I'm a big proponent of law enforcement. They're not all bad. Not all cops are bad, but there are some bad apples in every profession. And this was a clear example of these officers need to be retrained or either fired and let go because their behavior is inexcusable. They shouldn't have took it that far. They were in the wrong as well. And who knows? What if this wasn't Tyreek Hill? What if this was just your average Joe and it wasn't in a heavily populated area? You just never know what could happen. How these things can escalate and then somebody ends up getting shot or even potentially killed. So it's not a game out here. There's always been a lot of tension and animosity, in the community, particularly with black men, black and brown, and the cops. I just feel like they are treated in a different light, and the facts show it. I mean, all these situations that come up, you do have people that have resisted arrest and they haven't been a person of color, and they were kind of treated more favorable. They didn't get quite the abuse and quite the, brutality thing going on. So I'm not happy with the situation, but I do think I give some love to Tyreek Hill for actually coming out and owning up to his demeanor, and he even said he could have did things differently. And clearly, if he would have handled it differently, I think the police may have handled it differently as well. But it's all said and done. My biggest perspective is, you got to treat everyone with respect and dignity. It's tough being a police officer out here in these streets, not only in the U.S., but worldwide. There's a lot of crazy people. There's a lot of crazy things happening. It is a high, stressful position. I couldn't do it, so I give them much respect for even have the courage to put the badge on and go out there and roam the streets and try to protect everybody. But at the end of the day, I hope this serves as a lesson learned for everybody involved. Tyreek Hill, hopefully if you get in that situation again, you'll handle yourself a little bit more calmer. You'll just comply with whatever the order is. If they're asking you to roll it down, roll the window down. Roll them all down, and I think it will avoid future confrontations. But the Miami PD definitely needs to address those officers. They need to either be suspended or fired. They took it way, way too far. My question to you, Solomon, is who's more to blame here? Do you put the onus on Tyreek Hill, Miami Police Department or a little bit of both sides is which, exactly how I feel about it.
Well, initially I put it on Tyreek Hill just because if you see in the footage, the officers walk up, they rap on the window. They didn't bang on the window.
Yeah, they tapped on it.
And for him to be arrogant, don't be banging on my window like that and just repeating that, he's already being confrontational.
Yeah.
And so now you get a police officer. It's hot out there. And keep in mind, we're in Miami. There's a lot of money in Miami, not all of it legal. These guys come up into all different kinds of situations. So that's something that you just have to take into account as a police officer. You always have to be ready. And so they're already heightened up. He creates this controversial situation. And then he tries to roll the window back up as if he's just going to leave, now showing that privilege.
Right.
And it's just not respectful. And I know he got him there saying, oh, I respect, my mama told me. You weren't respectful. You weren't respectful to the police officers who were doing their job. They pulled you over because you were speeding or driving recklessly or whatever. It wasn't some kind of just trumped up thing. People tried to bring up race a little bit on this specific thing. I'm glad that was not the case. However, I do agree with you that there have been videos all over YouTube where you see, white guys getting pulled over and just talking crazy to these police officers, and they're just like, okay, well, sir, this and this and that.
Yeah.
And you just imagine yourself, what if that was a black person?
Yeah.
And where would they be? Would they still be here?
The conduct is certainly
absolutely
different. Yeah.
And so, of course, with Tyreek Hill, when they go to pull him out of the car, of course, when they open that door, they should have allowed him to get out of the car. Then, of course, now you see this muscled black man coming out. Immediately, all the officers jump in and start manhandling him to the ground before he even showed any signs of resisting arrest. So, yeah, you're right. That right there was a bad jump to conclusions. There were some perceptions made that should not have been made. But it was bad on both sides. But you're right. I do believe those officers need to be reprimanded, not because it's Tyreek Hill, because they just made assumptions about something that just wasn't there.
Right. And on another note regarding Tyreek Hill, he still had to play a football game.
Right.
After going through that, just mentally, emotionally, you're just in a different place. But props to him for going on the field. He had an 80-yard touchdown, which changed the game around for the Dolphins. They ended up getting the dub over the Jaguars 17-14. That was a good football game. But, yeah, he still performed at a high level even after all of that situation unfolded. So lesson learned on both sides. Hopefully we hear much less about this moving forward in the future. So props to Tyreek Hill and the Dolphins for getting the win, as well as Mike McDaniel for speaking on the situation after the game had ended. Moving on. It is week 2 of the NFL season. It's week 3 of the college season. So I've got some game picks. To fatten up the wallet. It's time to get that Gouda, that cheese, that queso. You know what time it is. And we're going to start in Fort Collins, Colorado. In-state rivalry game. We got the Colorado Buffaloes coming into Fort Collins to play the CSU Rams. This is a huge rivalry. These teams have been going at each other for many, many decades. The betting line in this game, Colorado is favored by 7.5. We got the Colorado State Rams at plus 7.5. And I love the Colorado State Rams on this. I think they are live at plus 7.5. Colorado has struggled to cover spreads, particularly ever since Coach Prime got to Boulder, and they were even worse before he arrived. But the Buffaloes have a lot of pressure on them. There's a lot of expectations. They're in the spotlight every week. I think that Colorado State is going to be loose. These teams played each other last year in Boulder, and it went to overtime. The Buffaloes escaped with a win. I believe they won by a touchdown, but Colorado State was ready. They came out. They matched up well against Colorado. They moved the football up and down the field. They ran the ball. They threw the ball. So I think that Colorado, particularly in that secondary with the injury to Shiloh Sanders, they're banged up. They can't run the football, and they can't protect Shedeur Sanders behind center, who's a great quarterback. So I think that Colorado State is active on this game at plus 7.5. So take them with the points. Extra lettuce on the sandwich, you feel me? Get paid. Roll with Colorado State this week at plus 7.5. I love them. We're going to move on to the NFL now. And we're going to head back to Carolina. And guess what? Jim Harbaugh, 1-0 as a Chargers head coach. He is headed to Carolina to take on the Panthers and Bryce Young and those boys. And like I said, it's a grease fire in Carolina. And I'm telling you right now, the betting line for that game is the Chargers -6. I love the Chargers to cover that spread. I think they win this by double digits because they're going to run the football with Dobbins. Justin Herbert is going to stretch the field. You know, the Chargers are going to basically go in, and I think they're going to win that game by several touchdowns. I would not be surprised if they win it by 14 points or more. But nonetheless, swallow the 6 points. Take the Chargers at -6. Carolina is a mess. They got a rookie head coach. They've got some injuries on the offensive side of the football. They can't stop a nosebleed on defense. So the Chargers are going to come in there and take over and dominate. Roll with the Chargers this week at -6. And last but not least, we got the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams headed down to Houston, Texas to play the Houston Texans. They've definitely got C.J. Stroud, who's an outstanding quarterback, with Dell and all those boys. Stephon Diggs, the latest addition to the Houston Texans. They escaped with a win in week 1 on the road against the Colts. Now they're at home for their first game. The betting line on this game is the Texans -6. I'm telling you right now, this is my pick of the week. Swallow the 6 points. C.J. Stroud is going to stretch the field. The Texans are going to be able to run the football. Chicago almost lost that game in week 1 to Tennessee. Caleb Williams did not look good at all. He was under duress most of the game. He was running for his life. He didn't look poised in the pocket. He made some bad throws. I really think that the Houston Texans defense has an advantage. They have more experience, and they're just a better football team. I don't understand why that line isn't higher. Maybe because it's only week 2 in the National Football League. So take the points. The Houston Texans are going to get it done. C.J. Stroud is going to ball out and have a big game, and Chicago is going to take their first loss of the year. With that being said, you know what we do on this show. It's time to bring the pain, so Solomon, let it rain! Holla! Thanks for watching Sports Hop. You already know what time it is. It's your boy, Mack B. For all the latest news on hip-hop and sports, subscribe here. We appreciate the love.